Welcome to Procurement Says No, episode 18. Good morning, Ed.
Hallelujah!
How the hell are you?
I'm super. Here I am in rainy Britain.
Lovely. It's September. It's peeing it down.
It is absolutely boring.
Lots of big excitement this time, Ed. We are going full on with a heated debate about the Procurement Act 2023, the new rules for public procurement in the UK, and we'll try to make it not as dull as it sounds, and indeed is.
I will try and contain my excitement.
It will be hard.
We touched on this a bit with Peter Smith back in episode 10 and 11, but this time we have a little more to say about it. So if you're a public procurement person, listen in and learn, and if you're not, listen in and see how lucky you are not to be a public procurement person. We'll be asking, what is it? Why? For what reason? How does it help? I've got to do what? Who came up with this nonsense? Or possibly, wow, this is great, it gives me a well thought out process to ensure competitiveness and minimise risk. And we'll be suggesting what we think might be a better way to do things in the public sector to get great value from public money, e.g. by not spending £200 million on dodgy PPE with a company set up last week by the government peer's husband and his shady business pals, allegedly.
Yes.
So, we have not one but two special guests this time, Ed. Graeme Hunter, who's a partner at EY, and Verity White, who's lead procurement business partner at neutral vendor consulting business Constellia. So what a treat we have in store for our lovely listeners from all around the world.
And the good bit is you don't have to listen to me because I know nothing about that topic, though I will pontificate and make stuff up.
So no change there then. But first, the news. A little bit of news. And this is related to the Public Procurement Act too. Get your diaries out and pencil in the 27th of February 2025 because the Cabinet Office and BIP present at the NEC Birmingham the Procurement Act Live, with Insight Zones live debate, engaging pavilions and a showcase exhibition, possibly some dinosaur animatronics too, and ice cream.
Oh, will there be lasers and flashing lights and a glitter ball?
I should hope so.
Oh,
and smoke bombs.
excellent.
I wonder if Graeme and Verity will be going. I'm having my nails done that day.
Oh, I'm having my legs shaved.
Wax.
I like them shaved.
In other news, and this was in the I newspaper back in July, workers get the right to ignore their emails under new rules. Employees will be given the right to ignore emails, texts and phone calls from their bosses during evenings, weekends and while on annual leave. The new rules are not mandatory, but part of a new code of practice for workplaces and among a wider package of rights overseen by Deputy PM Angela Rayner. Ministers plan to model the right to switch off on Ireland and Belgium. Businesses are likely to object, especially those with smaller workforces. Why smaller workforces? Huh?
Is this going to be like the Working Time Directive? And you start your employment with your new employer and the first thing they put in front of you is the opt-out from the Working Time Directive. No pressure there. Would you just sign on the dotted line? We'll be ringing you on Sunday at midday. Yes.
Any news, Ed?
I've just spotted a bit of a theme at the moment. You know how I love AI. And I've been reading...
It's going to solve all the world's problems.
It will. All of them. And more. So a variety of sources. I'll just give two examples, but there's a whole bunch of them. Art of Procurement, we're talking about it this weekend. Spend Matters have been writing about it extensively, and it's been going on and on and on. And basically, the theme seems to be now, within 2 years, all of our worlds are going to be completely different because of AI.
Ooh, 2 years to go.
2 years to go. So anyway, the Cheetah Research Institute.
Ah, yes, a fine body.
They haven't done any research on it yet, but they put a statement out about it.
Yes.
And the statement is, that's nonsense. That's nonsense.
Official. And that's the news. So now, Ed, very exciting, let's talk about the Procurement Act 2023. Huge excitement in public sector procurement organisations across the UK. A little nervous, some optimistic, some pessimistic, most asleep probably.
How boring.
Let's introduce our special guests. Firstly, Verity White, who is the lead procurement business partner at neutral vendor consulting business Constellia and was previously head of strategic procurement at Kensington and Chelsea, we won't mention Grenfell, and the national head of category at NHS Supply Chain. She also is a major rockstar type. Check her out on YouTube.
Hello. How are you?
Hello, Verity. Very fine, thank you. And we have Graeme Hunter, who is a partner at EY and is the people consulting lead for local public services and was also previously at PwC, and who is definitely acting in a personal capacity and not speaking for EY.
I am definitely not speaking on behalf of EY. Hello, Rich. Hello, Ed. Hello, Verity.
Jolly good. Welcome, Graeme. So, just as a little bit of background, the public procurement rules, for those of you outside of the UK and Europe, operate across all public sector spend across the European Union and have been in place since 2003, when Ed was in his mid-50s. And the UK had its own version until Brexit. Now, with Brexit, we've had the opportunity to reinvent the way that public procurement works in the UK, and it's just 8 years after the Brexit vote, we've now got an extremely complicated and just as bureaucratic version of the same sort of bonkers rules, but they are now our bonkers rules. Now, some say these sorts of rules limit speed and efficiency and innovation, but some say they encourage fairness and social value. But some say they limit proper involvement in specification development by suppliers, limiting best practice. And some say they prevent corruption and provide a clear audit trail. Now, I think we've all had experience of bidding for contracts or running procurements under the old Procurement Regs 2015. Any insights or stories to tell of bids and the sorts of things what you have done? Graeme, your initial views on whether it helps or hinders?
Yeah, so I guess I'm here from 2 points of view. So one is I've worked and bid to the public sector over the last 20 years. I'm not always convinced it gets the right solution and doesn't get the right engagement from the market. And I've also worked to support clients with their procurement processes. I mean, some of my really good stories are procurements which take 12 months and then collapse at the end of them because nobody really thought at the outset what they wanted and were always prepared to make a change as they went along. Constantly being asked to write 300 words on how we work with them as a partner and then being told that we didn't put enough detail into our response and it should have been a 1,000-word answer. I have a lot of views on the current procurement regulations. I guess what I would love from the new regulations is if we could get to a better interpretation of the rules that isn't as bound by bureaucracy and lets us collaborate more with the public sector to get to the right answer.
Oh, very good. Verity, big fan or not so keen?
Well, I think the rules are there for a reason, and the regulations have plenty of areas where you can be creative. And if you are working with incredibly skilled procurement and commercial people, then I believe that actually you can come to a good result and you can get excellent results out of it. I think one of the problems is time constraints, potentially knowledge constraints, and potentially people applying the wrong regulations in the wrong way or using the wrong types of processes. I think we have an opportunity now with the Procurement Act to reset things and make sure people are in a place whereby they have more skill, more knowledge, and they can utilise that to create better results in the future. So that's my hope.
Talking of limited knowledge, Ed, any views?
Yeah, it's all bonkers.
And you've got some experience of public procurement in other countries.
Yeah, so I think in Australia, having worked out there, they don't have procurement acts and rules like we have. They act in exactly the same way as the private sector. They expect their public procurement people to be, ethical and prudent and all that sort of stuff, but work with speed and involve the supply base in the way that we do with the private sector. And I think that their hands aren't tied. They seem to be able to make decisions quickly. And I think that I'm not massively knowledgeable about it, but I think in the US, there's lots of policies and documentations describing the way that providers to the public sector should act, margins that they should make. And I think they control it at the other end of the process, more with the supply base rather than with the buying organisation, the public sector organisation. So if you look at defence contracts, for example, There's lots and lots of documentation about the way in which you should adhere to good practice. You shouldn't screw the government over, all that sort of stuff. And they have and enact their right to audit to see what pricing looks like, what the cost looks like. We know there's loads of ways around that, and you can cheat and all that sort of stuff. But I think that they've taken a different viewpoint, and I think that I have a suspicion, I don't know, that the EU and the UK are the most bureaucratic in this process. And I think the end result of that is that broadly it slows things down.
I've done a few bids to public sector bodies in my time, and it takes resource, time, effort, a little bit of creative writing, checking and rechecking, and there's often something wrong on page 87 of the tender documentation, so you need to ask clarification questions which may or may not get a straight answer. I've also had to stop my team at Royal Mail from running tenders where you had to get to page 26 of our documentation before it said anything about what we wanted to buy. It had some lovely background to Royal Mail and its original Royal Charter and its policies and the fonts it likes to use. But no, tell me what you want to actually buy before we get to page 26.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are some of my favourite procurement documents where it's 30 pages long and half a side tells you what they're buying. That's always fun.
I always think that if you're doing your procurement documentation, put what you're buying right on the front page. Right, you can go into process, you can go into background if you want to later in the documentation, but actually what you're buying needs to be page one. Otherwise, when suppliers pick up that bid, if they can't see it straight away, it's going to put them off, before they've even started.
Yeah.
Great. So we've got some questions for you both. These are from listeners to the podcast, usually from all around the world, but today I suspect they're mostly from the UK. Firstly, from Michael Hunt in Bristol in the UK. Mike asks, what are the 3 key differences between this and the old OJU PCR 2015 regulations?
Overarchingly, I would say, the kind of theory behind it is fairly similar, so don't expect anything too mega exciting. From a point of view of the main changes, they have brought in everyone's going to love this. They've brought in loads more bureaucracy and paperwork.
Yay! So thrilled to hear that.
Everybody is very excited about that. But the point of that is to actually try and make it more transparent to suppliers, so suppliers can see what's going on and bid more effectively. The main point, I think, of the Act is to make it better for suppliers. It's not necessarily making it better for procurement people, but it's definitely trying to make it better for suppliers to bid for things. There's also a new central supplier database called the Supplier Information System, which is being created as we speak, though perhaps not ready for October the 28th. So I wonder what will happen with those dates. And that supplier centralized database is a database that all suppliers need to be registered on to bid into the sector. The aim of that is to, again, make it more streamlined and easier for suppliers to bid, because there's one version of the truth. They don't have to register on lots of different systems. I'm trying to think of I've got kind of 4 or 5 different main differences, but I think one of the other ones is just to do with the processes themselves. So there's only going to be 2 different processes. There will be the open process, and then there will be the competitive flexible procedure. Ooh. And that's basically take all your favorite bits from all of the other procedures and mush them into one. As long as you say what you're going to do from the offset, you can use that in a more creative way to make a better procedure. And the point of that is to try and make it more commercial and make people make better decisions and design a procedure which works for what they're buying, rather than being set into various different categories.
Do you believe that that's going to work?
I want to say yes. So I kind of refer back to what I was saying earlier about the skill and knowledge of the procurement people. If you've got really good procurement people who really understand what they're doing and the boundaries of what they can and can't do within the competitive flexible procedure, then yeah, I think it could work really well. I think one of the problems is procurement is not well regarded in the public sector, often underinvested in and underfunded. So I think a lot of the teams will potentially struggle with the boundaries of that, and potentially there could be a risk of challenge.
Yeah, I just pick up on your point, Verity, there, that as a DESMA, my day job, we were on the Crown Commercial Services Framework. We filled in all the data. We got selected. We went on there for 3 years. We won no business from it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And every time we referred to it to smaller, authorities and so forth, and said, "Oh, we're on there," we still had to fill in all the same details. So I take a little with a pinch of salt your supplier information system.
And no one's seen it yet because it's not been designed yet. So we don't know what it looks like.
That's the thing with the public sector for me. There's these big overlaps where something nice is set up, but then everybody ignores it and says, oh, no, you've got to tell us.
Yeah. And we don't know at the moment how it links with e-tendering systems and things like that, and potentially how that then links into, payment systems or ERPs within the sector itself. So when you're thinking about trying to make something streamlined, it's not just about one system, is it? It's about how all of the systems link with each other so you aren't duplicating what you need to do. So I like the theory of it. In practice, I guess we'll see what happens.
And stop press, I have a mole in the ministry, and I've heard on the mouldy grapevine that the whole thing is being reviewed and possibly postponed. The system in particular might have some gaps in it. As you said, nobody's seen it yet, and the processes too. Who knew? So it might have already been postponed by the time this goes out.
Who knew?
Graeme, any views from you?
I think there's a lot in there which is potentially very good for suppliers. Like, I think if you think about the way procurement works now, a spec comes out, we get the spec, we don't understand all the spec, we ask some questions, we get some generic responses back on it because they don't really want to commit to anything. Maybe they do a supplier engagement day where they invite us and read out the spec predominantly. Nobody asks questions because if we ask a question, we're giving away to our competitors in the room how we're thinking about the spec. And then everyone thinks, oh, there's been some engagement. So now you just get on and bid. We write a bid, we put it in, we get some written feedback. I think a lot in the Act around that competitive, flexible process and the ability to amend requirements as you go and think differently about how you ask the market to respond to you is very, very good. Like you, Ed, I would love a world in which we don't have to have a bunch of people who just fill in SQQs every day of their life. I'd love to never see one of those documents again and have to work out how much turnover we had in the last 3 years. What I worry about is that we're entering a world with a kind of lack of precedent, and the public sector procurement framework has very much become about a parent-child relationship, defending organisations against potential challenge rather than getting to the right solution. So I think there's a real risk, and Verity, you talked about that procurement professionals either don't have the skills or are too risk reverse or just don't really get the flexibilities on offer to them under the new regime. So I think it will work and it can work, but it needs some real focus on change and how you structure procurement differently in the public sector and how you upskill people to do it. And maybe some of the people who just come in to buy widgets every day and churn specs out don't need to be dealing with the real strategic things, and maybe you need some specialists in negotiation who just do that part of it. So I think it could help, but the people who can really make it work are the procurement professionals, and I worry that we will default to a parent-child relationship where the spec comes out and we just have to respond to it. That's kind of where I am.
Yeah.
What are you saying about procurement people?
I know it's dangerous on this podcast to be critical of procurement people, isn't it? But
No. We're critical of procurement people on this podcast all the time.
But I heard on a previous podcast Ed say that procurement hadn't changed for 1,000 years, and I just sort of felt, how sad is that? Like, can you imagine working in a world where nothing's changed for 1,000 years? I think, like, really just grab the opportunity, like, take advantage of it.
I think you're right what you said there about the risk averseness as well, because so many of the people that I've worked with in the public sector are very risk averse. Absolutely. So you've got to get away from that fear. Yeah. But there will always be fear when there's a change in legislation, because we all know that legal professionals may well be lining up to create case law based on the new act. So there's always going to be that element and that balance of risk averseness and actually trying to challenge things and make things better and actually really exploring the opportunities of the new procedure. They don't know. Most people in the public sector haven't even done a competitive dialogue. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think the negotiate procedure is interesting, isn't it? Because the current one has become just such a long thing that it was never really intended to be. Like, I supported a client on a negotiate procedure and it took like 8-9 months to get to an answer. It was never intended to be that, but it's become that because of that risk aversion about what can we do, what can't we do, the governance hoops people are going through. And so I do think there's a real challenge for the sector in terms of change.
Yeah, and I remember again my experience. I think it was at Royal Mail as well. Again, that where everyone was terrified of a supplier challenge all the time, and I would say to them, "But have we ever had a challenge?" And they'd go, "Well, there was nearly one a couple of years ago. And it's like, and how many times have we gone out to market? Oh, about 8,000. So yeah, one possible challenge in 8,000. Is it really such a risk? I don't know. But yeah, there's a definite fear factor, isn't there, all the way through?
The takeaway for me listening to all of you talk about this, it's as much with the people as it is with the procedures and the rules. And I've had some much less involvement than you guys, but I've had some involvement with various authorities. I've done some work for one of the big authorities up in the north of England, and that's exactly what I saw. Was that just that it was the people response to the procedure. It wasn't the procedure that was really at fault, I think, and that's the question mark in my mind about this whole thing. Is like, well, are they, to your point about they're risk averse, they don't want to try new suppliers, they're worried that you're going to get sued because you've made the wrong decision, but it never happens. Maybe you get the right caliber of people in the start, but then the culture damages or destroys their endeavour and their enthusiasm to make a difference and to interpret the rules in other ways.
Yeah, and if you take away the procedure, then all you get is dodgy ministers giving business to their mates, allegedly.
Allegedly.
I can't really comment on what happened during COVID.
Right, this is from Sheila Hitter from Brighton in the UK. Will the new regulations encourage SMEs to bid for government contracts? I work for a small business and we've always found that bidding is too time consuming and bureaucratic. Yes or no answer?
Yes or no answer?
No.
Well, the process is still going to be time consuming and bureaucratic. I don't think that's ever going to change, sadly. It's still going to be hard to pass thresholds to get onto frameworks. That's not going to change. They are trying to do things like breaking. So there's a mandatory thing where you need to break down your procurements into lots where possible to encourage SMEs to bid for smaller lots rather than having it as one overarching bigger contract. And within those lots, you've got to say, if you don't break it down into lots, you have to publish within your notice why you haven't done that. More bureaucracy, but effectively what they're trying to do within that is, lower the thresholds of finances, lower what you're looking for with regards to your SSQ and your insurance levels, perhaps because, if they're going for a smaller contract rather than larger contract, you don't have as much risk there. And it might encourage more SMEs in your local vicinity or to bid for that. And it might encourage better investment in your local area and better social value. So I think they're trying to within some of the provisions.
Yeah, they're trying. The intention is there. In the old regs, they would say they want to encourage SMEs into government, but the rules said something quite different.
Yeah.
We had Peter Smith on a few episodes ago, didn't we, Rich? And he's reported quite widely that as the years have passed and the ambition has been to bring in more SMEs, it's actually gone the opposite way. More work is going to fewer, bigger organisations.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was on a call last week with about 35 SMEs talking about a government framework, and it was for some work that we are doing. I asked them, what do they want out of the process? And what they want is to sit down with the client, talk about what the client wants, explain what they do, work with other suppliers and other SMEs to get to a good solution. So I think the assumption that it's about smaller contracts and breaking it into specified lots is probably flawed, actually. If you want to get SMEs involved, I think getting SME involved is about talking with them and working with them. I work with them a lot. It's about engagement more than it is about process.
Yeah, that engagement.
I think it will always be bureaucratic, to your point, Verity. And I'm a huge organization, and we find it bureaucratic. I worry that government's kind of got the wrong end of the stick in terms of engaging SMEs and what they want.
Perhaps when this episode goes live, we'll know that the government has abandoned that approach altogether. Okay, next question. This is from Trevor Watt in Leeds in the UK. We've already talked about this a bit. I've heard that there will be a new system that we will use to manage the tender process. Do you know much about this, and when will it be live? What will the data be used for, and will there be issues with GDPR? Well, we know that the government has a great track record of system implementations, always on time, always on budget, and full of the functionality that was requested.
None of us are jumping in to answer this, are they?
What can you even say? Yeah, I haven't even seen what it looks like. I've got no idea. But yeah, is it even ready? Like we said.
Well, the last thing I heard, the government was meeting with providers about it and was working with them on understanding what was possible.
Well, I thought they already chose a provider, but I don't know whether that went out to tender.
So moving swiftly on then, this is from Chris Lyon in Camden in London. Why do we need these rules? This sounds like it's one of Ed's mates.
Yeah, he's my man, Mr. Chris Lyon.
Surely we should become more commercially savvy and not be required to follow such strict guidelines. Well, I agree with Chris, but the problem is MPs, government ministers, senior civil servants and their mates. I'm saying no more, like you said, Graeme.
Let's move away from the UK. If you look across the world, there are countries which have a real problem with procurement and money going to places because of who is there rather than because of need. I'll mention absolutely no countries, but I think we can all think of a few. £1 in every 3 of your taxes and my taxes is spent with the private sector in this country. It's like £300 billion every year. And I do think there is some responsibility to kind of make sure that is spent effectively and gets good value. And frankly, the public sector doesn't have the same drivers and simplicity of motive that the private sector does to get the right answer out of that. So it's slightly surprising for me as the market person to be making this case, but I do think there is a need for some level of controls. However, I think the response to it has been onerous on both the public sector and suppliers, and has therefore become expensive to operate and bureaucratic and all the other things we've talked about. I think there are better ways of doing this.
Yeah.
And but I do think you need some rules.
The starting point is about control, isn't it?
Yeah.
And making sure that the public purse money is spent well. But the default is it mustn't be defrauded. There mustn't be cheats.
Yes.
There mustn't be stealing. But the way that the private sector look at it is the other way around, isn't it? It's about the value that we get. So if I took that 300 billion, say there was fraud to the tune of $1 billion, and $1 billion was siphoned off. We didn't catch it. It just happened and people got rich. If we were operating within the private sector, we would save more than the $1 billion we lost. Because if we're in the private sector, the drive would be to save 5-10% of that. So on the 300 billion, you'd save 30 billion overall in terms of doing more effective, better procurements. So it's the way that the telescope is looking at it for me that's wrong. If you created a legislative environment that said, if you defraud the government, you're going to prison for 10 years. The starting point is bureaucracy and stopping things happening rather than encouraging and trying to audit it out.
But then HM Prison Service will be full of all of the senior directors and partners of the Big Four, allegedly.
Yeah, well, exactly. But you could afford more posh prisons for those said people.
All you're doing, though, Ed, is like transferring the cost to the other end of the process. Like if you go to a reactive, we're going to investigate potential fraud. That's like more police, more judges, more prosecutors, like more prisons. But I do absolutely agree with your point that private sector mindset, which is not about what we have to do is be absolutely transparent and avoid fraud, but is about how do we work with the market to get the best solution that really drives value for our business, is the right one.
We can't move from a controlled to a completely uncontrolled environment anyway, where we are now with what we've had in place for such a long time. But I think part of it is investing to save as well. If you invest in upskilling the people that are doing the doing, so they are better at doing what they're doing, that's a lot of doings in one sentence, then they will end up with a better result. Why aren't your procurement people looking at total cost of ownership? Why aren't they looking at value-based procurement? Why aren't they looking at all of these bigger picture things and working together in a more holistic way to actually make something which is a more long-term saving rather than just widgets and pounds and pence? And I think that is an upskilling problem rather than a control and process problem.
I think Verity, it's a cultural issue. So we had a laugh on a previous episode about what I'll refer to as the red fire engine. It took 2 years to put the tender together because they specified what the fire engine would be, not what the outcomes would be.
Outcome based,
not outcome based.
That is crazy, but it is about that specification. And actually, I would sort of take it a step further. Like, so if you were buying a car, say tomorrow, you wouldn't write a specification and say, this is what I want in my car. You would look at some cars. You'd talk to the dealers about what you do. You'd say broadly, I want something that fits a family in it. I've got a big dog. I want a big boot. Like, I need to transport a drum kit. Like, you talk to them about what you want, and then you'd see what each of them had, and then you'd make your decision. And I feel like we've lost some of that principle in terms of public sector buying.
But just a serious point,
Yeah.
go back to Verity's point about collaboration, because that was in the legislation, wasn't it? You can work with suppliers. But culturally, it's not happening because people are scared of doing it.
It is frowned upon. A lot of people are very scared. Yeah.
Yeah, I quite often we get tenders out and we go back and we say, we're not entirely clear on what you want. Like, this is a tender where we could give you the gold-plated one and it'd be £500,000, or it would be a really quick and simple. We can do it in 4 weeks. It'll be 60. We just don't know what you want out of your tender. Can we talk to you? And they go, no. So we don't bid because we go, well, 50-50. It's not good odds.
And then what will happen is they'll award it to someone based on MEET, which is the best procurement acronym. So sad that's going. So they'll reward it based on MEET, and they'll get 6 months into the project and they'll realise that's not what they wanted, and then they'll have to either redo it or just add loads of money and Regulation 70 to it and try and get more money into the budget. And the lack of engagement with suppliers I've always found really fascinating. It is like people don't trust them. Oh, no, they can't possibly come along because they're going to sell me something. And it's like, well, actually, don't you want to know what's happening in the market? Because you're not an expert in that specific market. You need to know what's happening and what the new developments are that you don't know about yet to be able to then create something that's going to be fit for purpose.
As long as the meat's halal. The next question is from Peter Nurse, who is also in London. I like the idea of the new dynamic markets process. How does this differ from the old dynamic purchasing system, DPS?
Well,
I have no idea about this. The old DPS was a shambles, though, wasn't it? So surely this can't be worse.
Fun fact, dynamic marketplaces, you can only use them to award over threshold procurements.
Which is weird, isn't it? Why not? If they work well, then why not use them for under threshold? That's bizarre. And what would stop you from using it?
So that on its own, I think, means that it's not really going to be that. It's fine if you want to buy big things.
I wonder why they came up with that rule that it has to be above threshold. Weird.
I've not read the latest guidance that's come out on dynamic marketplaces, but I did see that headline the other day and that made me laugh. So
perhaps that's something that might change when they delay and change it all. Who knows? Right, next question. And this one is from Anna Dapter in Carlisle. Will procurement teams be able to develop their own best practice procurement processes under the new regs? And do you think this will then spread across public procurement to create a single, better way of working?
Isn't that what the competitive flexible procedure is meant to be?
Whether it will all coalesce into a single best practice way of working, though.
Oh, God, no.
Dream.
What will happen is every single authority /trust /department will create their own version of what they want the tendering processes to be, and rather than being like flexible and like changing it based on what the specification in the market is, they'll have like, no, these are our versions and they're the ones that you can use. That's what I can see happening.
Which will actually make it worse for suppliers who are bidding across a number of different clients.
I mean, I hope they don't do that, but I don't know. We'll see.
Perhaps in time there might be the creation of some better practice and uniformity for a common, better way of doing things. I'll not hold my breath, though. As a whisper, some public procurement teams are very under-resourced and under the table.
My heart sort of sinks with this question, to be honest, because I sort of just picture this stream of words and documents and PowerPoints and requirements kind of flowing out and everyone pinching the bits they like and things just getting more and more complicated over time.
Right, next question is from Oliver Balls in Manchester. I understand that frameworks will be up to just 4 years. Is this correct? And will this lead to more frequent and higher transition costs for repeat purchases, or does it drive value, in your opinion?
Yeah.
Is it 4 years? Not for contracts, so what's that? Is that longer?
Not quite. It's not quite the case. So it's flexible frameworks. So what they do is they allow you to award it for 4 years, but then plus another. So you can basically add more time to your frameworks. At the moment, in the current regs, they are meant to only be 4 years long. Some people sneak around that. Yeah, the new flexible framework basically is meant to address the fact that 4 years often isn't long enough, and it gives you a chance to almost reopen the framework at certain points, as long as you say when that's going to happen, to add more time. Say what you're going to do it. If you don't say what you're going to do, you can't do it. So you've got to have a magic crystal ball right at the beginning to work out what it is you're going to do and write that out, because otherwise, if you don't say it at the beginning, you cannot do it.
Yes, so the framework is for 4 years, and then we know that such and such a thing is going to happen. So therefore, we're going to allow for another 2 years and a new entrant to join the framework at that point.
And at that point, you can go back to all of the people on the framework and say, do you want to adjust your bid? So it will move with the market conditions more.
That sounds quite good then. That's all right.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah.
Okay. Any other views from anyone, or have we all fallen asleep now? Right. Next question then. And this is from Elon Musk in London. I don't know. I think that might not be his real name. Is there any data to show whether public procurement rules increase or stifle competition? Now, there must be something in the Cheetah Institute for this, Ed. So I've had a look, and yes, here we go. 42% of procurement heads in public sector think that the procurement rules will increase competition, whereas 42% think they will stifle competition, and 42% are undecided. So conclusive proof there. And that's official because that's from the Cheetah Data Research Institute that's sponsored by this podcast.
Oh dear. I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? I think if you've got a marketplace where it's consistently been won by one supplier and you're in danger of there being a monopoly in the market, then yes, it would increase competition. But if you're looking at it, you've got to look at it through different lenses. From an SME point of view, then probably not.
I don't have any data on it. I sort of think the purpose of procurement is to get the right stuff for government at the right price. And as long as it's not one supplier, as you said, it's not a monopoly position, I think it's maybe slightly the wrong question. But a better question for me would be, is procurement helping government to get really good services from the market at a price it can afford to pay? And like all three of you are shaking your head as I ask that question, so I think I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, a little tale on this one, Rich, from when I was at Exchanging.
Oh.
And I went into Whitehall. So we were sort of third tier outsourcer, but we were very, very strong in financial services, managing trades, doing all the back office for people like Fonds Depot Bank, Deutsche Bank, etc. So big players. I went into Whitehall, a specific invitation from a Mandarin, and they said, we will help you get in. So there was a tender for NSI, I think, the premium bonds or type people, and they were going out to market. And I said, well, we'll bid for that then. And we failed immediately at the PQQ stage because we had no experience in the public sector in the UK. I went back to the Mandarin, who'll remain nameless, but a very senior person who come from a very senior position in consultancy actually, said, oh, you disqualified us. We have banking licenses and all that sort of stuff across Europe. And so we got the let, and then we bid for it, and then we disavowed because we had no experience.
Oh my God.
The exciting bit of it, as I did go into Whitehall and I could see the garden of Downing Street from the meeting room I was in, so there's a little bit of excitement from that meeting.
Was there a party going on?
There was no party.
Secrets Act, I can't speak.
One of the interesting things under the new Act is how they're going to bring in the supplier performance. So published and publishable supplier performance for all contracts over 5 million, a new debarment list, which obviously is not part of what we do at the moment under the procurement regs. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out and whether that actually waters down KPIs in contracts that are over 5 million, because if you've got something that you have to publish every quarter on a KPI in a contract and you're just a contract manager sat in a local authority somewhere, are you going to remember or necessarily do that?
Never. That's never going to happen. It's never going to happen, is it? When I was first a buyer, I was managing all the scoring of suppliers, the monthly performance. So, why don't we put it up on the TV screens in reception? No! You publish it. Yeah, you get sued. Everyone
will say, oh, that's commercially sensitive, that's commercially sensitive, that's commercially sensitive. And actually, it's going to be, that's why I'm intrigued to see how it's going to roll out.
I tell you what, the only way you get debarred as a supplier in the public sector is if your business goes bankrupt. Yeah, that's how you get debarred, because you don't exist anymore. Yeah. Who gets disbarred?
So there you are, another Ed's tip for the top. If you're a supplier and you don't want to work for government, just go bankrupt.
Best advice ever.
So, next question, and this is from Trudy Scrumptious in Chester. What are the rules on publishing notices and contract awards? And what will publishing this information achieve? Verity, you know all about this.
I mean, my head's in my hands because there are so many new notices that you have to publish. You have to publish at the beginning of every financial year. You need to publish a pipeline notice, which states every single thing that you're going to tender over 2 million in the coming 18 months. I can't even remember the amount, but there's maybe 14 notices or something that you have to publish, including, like I said, contract KPI notices if they're over a certain. So you've got to publish that through the life of the contract after the contract's been let as well. It's kind of bonkers, actually, the amount of administration that's being forced upon the sector with regards to these notices, and it's going to be very difficult for most procurement teams to do because they're under-resourced, as we said earlier. They just don't have the people anyway. And so much procurement is done outside of the teams too, because there's going to be new notices that you mandatorily need to publish for below-threshold contracts. Everything over 30k or 12k in central government, you have to publish notices for now. So it's the amount of administration, and technically, if you don't publish the notices or the mandatory ones, you can get a challenge.
So if they're going to review / postpone / change things following the announcement that has been made, was made, will be made at some point in the future, then surely this is one of the things that's got to change, yeah?
I don't think that's going to change. This has not changed throughout the entirety of the process. I can't see it changing now. And that's the genuine worry and the genuine fear, I think, from procurement and commercial departments in the sector is around these notices and what that means.
Good news, though. AI is going to solve all our problems in the next 2 years, I hear.
Oh, good.
Perfect.
Good.
Yeah, all the procurement commentators saying within 2 years, the world will be completely different with AI. So don't worry about it. AI will do it for you.
AI will do it. Be fine.
With a little Alexa voice.
To that point, though, Ed, like,
I'm sure how to help you then.
maybe we should ask Alexa about the Procurement Act.
She'll know more than I do.
To your point, Ed, about technology, though, all this publication just feels very analog to me. The publication of 18 months forward look of contracts just reminds me of like the 1990s when councils were suddenly expected to post information of every policy they were planning to update in the next 18 months. It just feels old-fashioned. Like, there surely is a technological way we could do this rather than it being an annual publication. There's surely a way that you could have an open list that you just updated as you went through the year. I feel it's just an area where we've kind of defaulted to, oh, there's a document we need to stick on a website, rather than thinking, what's the purpose of this and how could we do it in a way that is a bit more streamlined? Well, I think it's potentially, from a transparency point of view, transformative. You imagine the data that will come out about how contracts are actually being run and delivered and operated. But the bureaucracy of it's crazy. Like, there must be a more sensible way to do this, is my view.
Right, another question. This one is from Nigel Garage in the UK. Why don't we just scrap this nonsense, which has clearly been imported from the EU and has no place in modern British procurement? That's from Daily Mail reader Nigel Garage.
Are you sure Ed hasn't been writing in? I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, doesn't it? It depends on what you want from a procurement process. If your objective is just to farm out contracts to the private sector, then it's absolutely overblown. If you believe there need to be some protections to help the public get the best value for the money that they pay in their taxes, you need some regulations, and these are the rules we've got.
And finally, from Charles Wattage from Bloomsbury in London, who asks, which is a sort of a summary really, what are the best improvements to the new regs? What are the worst changes? And what's missing, in your opinion? Who wants to go first?
I think the best improvements are if they do it properly, the supplier database will effectively be very good for suppliers. From a point of view of the worst improvements, I think it's, rather than there being the worst improvements, I think it's not thinking about how the burdens of some of the improvements that have been put into the Act are going to lie. Yeah. And I think that's my problem, is the fact that these decisions have been made, I think, with blinkers on, not thinking about how it's going to impact the actual people working in the sector. So that for me would be, I suppose, the worst part of it. For review of what's missing, well, the Procurement Act specifically is missing everything to do with the provider selection regime. So it's everything around healthcare, because there's a whole separate piece of legislation for that, which doesn't link to it at all, and also social value.
I think that the best thing for me is the potential for more flexibility and more collaboration with the supply base. I think that's the thing that everybody is crying out for. It would be really good to see that work. I'm not sure I've got a worst particularly, but I think I'd like to see more support for professionals about how they adapt and how they adopt this. And I'd like to think some guidance on skills and what you invest in and how you grow a base of people who can really execute on this well, how you manage the change in organizations and put people into the right roles. And I'd also like a bit of a sense of how could you work in a bit more of a modern way. To Ed's point, AI, what could AI do in terms of helping you churn out some of this information? How could you use data? If you think about the same products being bought in 300 local authorities, how do you share the data across that to make sure that everyone's getting good value out of it? How do you get to that position? We live in a world of technology. I think you could adopt that to get much better outcomes out of the Procurement Act. So I think what would I build on it? I wouldn't add more into the Act because frankly, I think there's quite enough in there. I would put more effort into the implementation of it because that's what's going to make it succeed or fail.
Boom. And on that bombshell, quick shout out to Kieran McGaughey, who's a legal bloke at Newcastle City Council, or Council. He talks a lot of sense. He says we should never conflate legally compliant procurement with good procurement. And he gives an example. Your authority is undertaking a complex, high-value procurement process. You're a bit pushed for time, so you do limited or no engagement with the market. You publish the tender and give bidders a minimum legal timescale under the Procurement Act, generally 25 days. Is this legally compliant? Probably, yes. But is it a good way to run procurement? I think we all know the answer to that. Stunned silence. Well, we've done that to death. We all now know everything about the Procurement Act, except that it might all change. So thanks to Verity, and thanks to Graeme for your time.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all again next time on Procurement Says No. Ta-ta.
Ta-ra.
Woo! What's not to love? It is. It is very, but doesn't it smack to what I was saying about it's like this has been designed by people that have got no idea what's actually going on in public procurement for
the Reform Party.
I think this is the way things happen in central government, right? As a bunch of people who are pretty fresh out of university get into a room and are tasked with sorting something out and writing a lot of policy documents. That's how central government works.
Oh my God.
I did enjoy the story in the paper about the HS2 trains being too high for the platforms.
That was classic procurement. Oh my God.
Yeah, Brunel and co would be turning in their graves, wouldn't they? How useless we are at engineering.
It would, yeah, and how useless we are at infrastructure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.